Hello, and welcome to the Comedian's Paradise. This is the podcast where we speak to comedians and clowns across this wonderful globe. Now, in this episode, we're going to the wonderful place, all the million of miles away from the UK. We're going to South Africa, and we're going to find out about the Friendly City Comedy Crew, the biggest comedy gang in South Africa. And we're going to speak to the co-founders of it, Chantal Harris and Nolwazi Nkwandla.
Cool.
What an intro. And please welcome them to the stage. Hello.
Woo!
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Marvin.
Thank you guys for coming on the podcast. It's great to have you here. And for anyone that's listening right now and they want to find out about you guys and like how has the Friendly, tell us a little summary of your comedy journeys, where you got to where you are today, and how you set up the Friendly City Comedy Crew.
Do you want to go first, Nolwazi?
I can. So in terms of getting started in comedy, it was just is that what I'm answering? Or how we started the Friendly City Comedy Group?
First comedy, and then
So how I started in comedy was basically just, I found that I was always making my friends laugh in conversation. And one friend said to me at one point, because at this time I was a journalism student at the local university, and she said to me, listen, if journalism doesn't work out or you ever find yourself with the opportunity, just try comedy once. And I got the opportunity and I tried it. And I really liked it. And I thought, you know what, this is an option. So that's how it started for me.
Yeah, cool. And so what happened with me, I did one of those values exercises, you know, the ones where you have all the words and you got to choose your values. So it was actually from Brene Brown. So I had these 100 values and you have to sift them down. Eventually you end up with 2 in the process of elimination. And basically, my values are generosity and humor. And I was like, wow, where did that come from? But if I look back, you know, it's always been something. I've never always dreamed of being a comedian. That's not. But I always thought, you know, I love comedy. I watch comedy because it makes me feel better. I stay away from the horrors and the stuff like that. I read comedic books, Terry Pratchett, that kind of thing. So it was just something. And then I met Nolwazi. And I saw her go on stage and open for one of our top comedians. And I was like, wow, look at this chick. She is so brave. And she's doing it. She's a woman that's doing it in comedy. So I connected with her and I said, come, let's start a thing. Because, you know, we also asked the comedians in town, the local ones, and they weren't excessively helpful in terms of what we wanted to do, and specifically me. So it was quite a self-serving kind of a thing that made us start the Friendly City Comedy Crew. Although Nolwazi had some sort of mentoring and coaching on her journey, I'd had nothing. I was starting from point zero. So I wanted to learn more. And by starting the comedy crew really was my way of learning. So, okay. Yeah, we only started last year, February 2023 was our first open mic night. That was really when we started. So we haven't been going for very long either.
But so a question on that is like, how have you changed the scene around you by setting up the club? But how has it changed you guys as comedians?
Well, from my point of view, I thought it was going to be a whole lot easier. And it's not at all. Yeah. You know, you think to yourself, how difficult can it be? You stand on stage and you tell some jokes. And it's just not that easy. It's just not that easy. So for me, it's changed just my whole outlook. For one, I didn't realize that there were so many local comedians, people that I've never heard of before in my life. You hear about all the well-known South African ones, but you don't realize that there's this whole community, local ones, And so when we started, we just started collecting these names, and we started a WhatsApp group, and we've now got more than 40 people on our WhatsApp group. And those are just local comedians, local guys at different stages, because a lot of the people that have joined us are people that have also never done comedy. So we're providing the platform, a monthly open mic nights for them to practice on. And then we do occasionally run shows. And then what we also do is we connect up with the more experienced comedians and get them to come and do a workshop or chat to our comedians so that we can learn from them to find out, how do we do things.
Okay. And with running a comedy club myself, I know that there are some positives and negatives with it. You do get the odd nonsense with it, and
Yeah.
You must get a lot of that as well.
For us, it's a case of, because we're two women, so it's a very male-dominated industry, as I'm sure you know. So with some of the situations, it's kind of like some of the guys want to come in and kind of make their presence known and make it known that they're like, we are here, and like, want to call the shots. And we kind of have to be like, no, this is our house. What we say goes. These are our rules. These are our guidelines. This is how it goes at our events. And although it can be challenging at times, but it's been rewarding for the most part. So we're getting stage time. We making a little bit of money with some of the shows that we do, although a lot of it is honestly thankless work. But it is it's an interesting journey that we've been on because we've grown as comedians as well, besides the comedy side, but also the admin side of running a show, having an event, having to do the planning of all of that stuff, the marketing. So it's been an interesting experience.
Yeah, and we've definitely made, we've sort of, although the city we live in, Gqeberha, is very small, and we haven't got a massive comedy sort of circuit as such, we have been noticed throughout South Africa, and we have had some really great comedians come through and, perform on our stage. So I like to think that we're making a change, we're making a difference. Many people tell us that, not just comedians, but audience members as well. They say, thank you, we so appreciate what you're doing for comedy in the city. So I feel that we have achieved something, and we've sort of just elevated the profile of comedians in the city. We also, what's been happening, well, specifically for Nolwazi and I, but I think for other members of our crew as well, is we've been able to get other gigs, paying gigs with other sort of theatrical organizations or comedy productions within the city, which is nice.
Yeah.
You gain access to people and they've seen your work and they're like, oh, they're good, let's get them on your show. Whilst if you didn't have that, you wouldn't have gained access to them.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
And running a comedy gig brings a lot of challenges. I mean, I myself, like, getting people in is always the biggest thing. That's a bit of a challenge. And I'm really intrigued with this as a UK comedy promoter. How is it with regards to like flyering and like getting people in, like street marketing? Because sometimes at some of my shows, I'll get people that they will come into shows for a while. Some of them expect to get in for free and they try and push a bit. Do you get that in South African comedy clubs where some people will try and push and try and get a free ticket or anything like that?
So the rule is, in terms of amongst us comics, the unspoken rule is that comedians shouldn't have to pay to attend a comedy show. That seems to be the prevalent feeling amongst everyone. So in that case, if comics come, it's fine. It's not a problem. But then what can happen is sometimes maybe a guy will come and he'll come with his wife or he'll come with other people. And then it's a case of saying, okay, you can come for free, but you're entourage of people need to pay for their tickets, but we haven't really had massive pushback in terms of that. And it's usually fun. And what we do also in terms of advertising is like Instagram sponsored ads and Facebook. And we've actually found that when we do the Instagram sponsored ad and Facebook, the turnout is usually better. So that helps push in terms of ticket sales. But sometimes it's also just a case of the person who's on the lineup has got a decent following in the city, and those people will pull through and come and watch. And obviously they stay for the whole show. So it really depends. And the variables of what it depends on changes from month to month. It's not always the same situation every month.
Is the South African scene quite close together? Like in terms of that, it's not hard to gig across the country. Are you able to gig more than one time in a night in where you guys are based, or is it? Yeah, how are how the cities linked to each other in terms of the comedy scene?
No. So it's not difficult. If you can get to another city, it's okay. But typically, because we do so much free work, and one of my sort of the way I think, if I ask to be on a lineup, I don't expect to get paid for that. I don't know if that's even an unwritten rule or a rule or anything. So if I approach somebody and say, I see you coming to town, I want to be on your lineup, can I have 5 minutes? And they say, yes, I don't expect to be paid for that. Obviously, if somebody approaches me and says, hey, I'd love you to be on my lineup, I expect to be paid for that. So typically, there's a lot more of us asking to be on lineups than actually getting asked to be on lineups. So we typically are not a very affluent bunch. So for us to actually get to other centers is a challenge. Our closest other comedy sort of town would be about a 3-hour drive away from here. So that's 3 hours getting into a car, paying for the petrol, which is exorbitant, finding accommodation, and so it's a costly experience. If we want to go to the bigger centers, which would be Johannesburg and Cape Town, which have both got flourishing comedy sort of communities, then you're looking at nothing under 5,000 rand to get up there, spend time there, do that, which we've both just recently done. We've just both recently been in Johannesburg. We'd love to get down to Cape Town. Nolwazi's going to go in October, but she's sort of tagging along with her mom and them because her mom's going to do a race. But we've got to be opportunistic with regards to these things. So it is challenging. And from our point of view, we've only really been able to establish this once a month open mic night. So as you know, that's not enough time. That's not enough for new comedians to be able to practice and hone their skills. The other thing on that, the other side of that is the audience doesn't want to come and see the same people all the time telling the same jokes. So then there's a reluctance to keep on supporting. Although our audience, we have got a couple of audience members, literally a handful, that will come to all our shows, and it's just, and they're happy to pay to watch us, even if we're telling the same jokes. which is really nice. We are looking at establishing another open mic night, which is going to be slightly different, more of a variety kind of a show. So we've got the last laugh, and we'll have the first laugh going, hopefully by September, if all things go well. And then what we do is when the other bigger comedians coming through, often the bigger comedians come through with their own comedians, their own lineup. They don't necessarily want to, because they know who they can trust and who, But we try, as a community, we try and do as much stage time as possible. But you can hear it's not a lot. I don't know what Nolwazi has probably got additional comments on that point.
That's true. Unfortunately, we don't get as much stage time as we would like, because once a month is not good enough. But there are shows that pop up, because there's two other groups, which are GQ Comedy and Mainie Comedy. They do shows within the city. And with the GQ comedy guys, they will bring national people and then have the local comedians support them. So that helps to kind of get your name out there and all of that with the local people who maybe didn't know that you were a comedian in the city. But at the same time, that's not happening, multiple times a month. That's also maybe a once a month thing. So the thing that's nice is with us starting and becoming a monthly thing, we kind of were encouraging the other guys who are already in the city to start their own things. And now that gives us more opportunities throughout the month or from a month to month basis instead of just that one performance in the month.
Okay. But it is an interesting thing when you mention that, because I've seen I know a comedian in Sweden where he says that some people in the smaller parts of Sweden are just as funny as those in Sweden, even though they don't get to gig as much.
Yeah.
And comedians say it's all about stage time. I don't know about that. You do need the stage time, but I think you just find out from a lot of comics that I've spoken to on the podcast, they find a way through it.
Yeah, there's always a mirror. You can tell yourself jokes.
Sorry, I really sounded so.
Yeah. So I do agree with you, Marvin, to an extent. And before I started this comedy journey, I'd heard that you've got to get the stage time. You've got to get the stage time. But even when I started, I thought, but why is it only the stage time? And I suppose what the stage time does is it makes you comfortable in front of an audience. It helps you with your audience interaction as well, because then you start feeding off the energy or tapping into the audience. But then you've also got to be able to, and this is what for me stage time does to me, it gives me the opportunity to practice those kind of skills, that interaction, that engagement. What happens if we have a heckler in the crowd? How do you handle that? Because that you can't really experience on your own at home, telling jokes to your family and friends or to yourself in the mirror. Yeah. But when we were in Johannesburg, now, for instance, Nolwazi was with me for 8 days. I think we gigged for 6 of those 8 days.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
so different to
Another thing also is the stage time you need, because sometimes you may have written a joke and it's hilarious, but depending on your audience, they might not actually find what is your punchline funny. They might find something in the middle of the joke that they think is hilarious. And then you can actually take that and make your joke better and tweak it a little bit more to actually give it its full potential of funniness. So sometimes it's difficult to figure that out on your own. You do need an audience to kind of test it out on to see if it works or not, because obviously your friends and family are going to be like, oh, you're hilarious, but like at the end of the day the audience is what matters.
Right.
But some people are very lucky. They're quite gifted and comfortable in front of a crowd of people, crowd of strangers listening to you, waiting to laugh. But for some of us, the practice actually really does help in getting on stage and doing the thing.
Yeah, so what we've tried to do here before is do joke writing feedback sessions. And I know people sort of want to do that, but it's just like a time thing. How do you actually juggling life plus this comedy career? But I found that very helpful in Johannesburg, because I did a couple of interactions where there were only comedians in the audience. And then sort of, although typically comedians don't laugh at you.
Yeah,
they only laugh at you if you're dying on stage. So, but it's also nice. We managed to have a really good session with one of our a long established comedian who actually does copywriting for ads as well. And he actually sat with us and he gave us some different pointers on how to actually get our jokes looking a little bit different, looking better. and experimenting with them, which is great.
What, you mentioned an interesting thing about comedians. Yeah, and also I found that comedians laugh at slightly different things to your regular people. But yeah, what you said there as well about you want to perform for audience, I agree 100% with that. There is in the UK you got the stand-up scene, there's also a bit of a clown thing going on where I'm sent you an episode of podcast and they like to go to the Edinburgh Fringe. One of the things that I've found a bit of when people go up to the Edinburgh Fringe, a lot of people put in shows with their friends or family because they're struggling to get an audience to test their hour out. But I'm thinking, which do you think is more useful? An audience full of 20 of your friends and one person you don't know, or 5 audience members who don't know you from Adam when you're trying to build an hour show? What do you think?
That's an interesting question. It's an interesting question. I've used both. I mean, I use my kids to bounce ideas off. And if I go to my family, my mom and them, then I'll do I won't do a performance, but I'll tell them a story just to see what response I'm going to get on that. So it's a way of testing material. But it's, also audiences are so diverse. So it's an interesting sort of a test. Yeah, it was a great question. I don't even know if I can really answer it properly. I think it's good to have the unknown people, because the people that know you and probably love you are already going to support you. So they're probably going to laugh at you. And they're going to tell you you're fantastic afterwards.
Yeah.
I think it's best to have a mixture, honestly. Yeah. A good mix with more strangers than family and friends.
The only time if I had a choice, I'd much rather choose 5 people that I don't know from Adam. 1, I feel I can take bigger risks with people I don't know. 2, because if it's with people you know, when you do terribly, fuck me, it's so sorry, I don't want to swear. It's a bit uncomfortable. And number 3, I prefer that. But yeah, they're going to be too nice to you. I prefer a small audience, but I think the time where it's if you're just really unsure about something and you really want to take the water steps into something that you're really scared of, comedy, maybe the first preview, get your friends and family to do it because you're really scared and you need the support. But after that, you need to be out there in the big bad world and people that don't give a shit.
Yeah.
But can I tell you something, Marvin?
Yes, please do. I love this.
My parents are not allowed to come to my shows. My brother is allowed to come because I will very often bounce off ideas off of him, or if I've written something, I'll read it to him to get his view on it. But for the most part, my parents are just not allowed, because when I first said to my mom, I think I want to become a comedian, her response was, "But you're not funny." So it's a bit of retribution. But at the same time, also, when I tell her the content of my comedy, she will say, "Oh, but that's too personal. You can't say that." But comedy is about telling your truth and whatever funniness you find in your experiences or your thoughts or whatever has happened to you. So when she says that, she's like, "Oh, it's so personal. You can't say that and you can't say this." I'm like, you know what? Don't come. Don't come. I'm not going to tell you the jokes. Just know when I come home and I'll be like, "Oh, it was a great night." And that's that. We don't really get into too much detail, but it's just one of those things sometimes where it's like, you know what? They support me very much, because she even said to me one time, she was like, "I'm so proud of you for doing this thing," even though I wasn't like so positive about it. But at the end of the day, I know what it is I'm setting out to do, and I know they support me, but they don't actually have to be there for every performance. So yeah, or any performances.
Yeah. No, I agree. The the only thing that does irritate me when you mention you do comedy to your friends and your family is that they will say advice where it's clear that they haven't taken the step on stage and seen how difficult it is. So I'll get advice from my friends and family, and they'll say, "Oh, just talk about being Asian and your experiences and this and that, or just talk about things you've experienced." It's not that easy. You got to. I got to look at my persona, and yeah, they always give such bland advice about that, which isn't at all practical. And
No,
also, I play a character, so it's a bit. I haven't quite figured out yet in terms what you said there works with a lot of the greatest stand-ups, but I'm still figuring it out in terms of playing Zorro as me and how I can whether it works with the personal stuff. At the moment, I've had a lot of crazy things. I got a joke. Yeah, it's that's the thing that irritates me when people talk about comedy and they haven't really done their research or made any effort to
yeah,
understand what goes on behind the scenes.
yeah.
We have a very well-known South African comedian who's been touring internationally. In actual fact, one of the things that he does, and there are a couple of comedians that do this, is they go to the Edinburgh Fringe every year. They bankroll themselves, they do it, they pay for it, they don't make any money, but they go and they do it for the experience. We've got something similar quite close to us called the National Arts Festival, actually, which we really need to look at doing, which also gives you that opportunity to keep on getting on the stage. But he actually says that when he started doing comedy, people would say to him, "Oh, it's so easy. You just have to stand on stage and you're talking absolute rubbish and you get paid to do that. What a lacquer job." And he was like, "Guys, it's hard work. Can you do this?" And he actually tells this joke in his set, and then he calls, he calls on the audience. He says, "Well, what do you do?" And there's always an engineer in the audience. And the guy will, somebody will say, "Oh, I'm an engineer," not necessarily always a guy. He'll say, "Well, here's a brick, go do something with that." And tries to diminish it in that way, just to show that being a comedian it's a job. We've got to work hard at this. It's not, we can be naturally funny, but we can also write well-crafted comedy, and we can practice and become better, and etc., etc., etc. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing that I must say I get a lot of feedback from my kids though. Um, and I've found that some of what they have said, not all of it, and I don't take, I'll listen to everybody's advice, but I don't necessarily take everybody's advice to heart. So I've one of my best sort of punchlines, ending punchlines of a joke, a longish joke, was given to me by my daughter, my one daughter.
Hmm.
So yeah.
But yeah, it's not always the case, but that's what I tend to get a lot of the times. And as soon as I
Mm.
get that, I turn my ears off and just nod to avoid an
Right,
argument. Or should I be more tactile in it? I don't know. I just feel it's not worth getting in an argument with someone with it. So you just nod and
Yeah,
move on. But then I'm thinking at the same time, I'm people pleasing and being too polite. What do you think
yeah.
that?
right.
For me, the thing that's frustrating is when people will constantly say to me, it's like something funny will happen, and they'll say, "Oh, you should put that in your comedy set." I'm
Oh
like, "That's not
yes.
how it goes. That's not how it goes. Sorry." But that's so that happens quite a lot, and I just laugh it off and carry on. I don't really make an issue of it, but I do find it quite irritating.
But in saying that, Marvin, for me, people pleasing is something that I've really had to work on. That's why I'm not a fan of comedians ragging the audience or roasts in actual fact. But I understand that it has its place in comedy. So just to go back to your thing with you just stop listening to people. One of the things that comedy does give us, and this is one of the things that I love about it, I'm not there yet, is that we can say some really controversial things on stage. We have that ability. So, and I often think, how do you separate the two? Your on-stage personality and persona, does that mean that's how you've got to be off stage? And if you are going to be like that off stage, are you prepared to insult people maybe, or make people dislike you because of something that you have said because you don't want to be a people pleaser.
It's so. There's a comedian who I interviewed just before this episode here called Martin Davis, and he talks about it. He's been going for 30 years. And he talks about every time we get on stage, you mentioned before, it's a personal thing. He says it's like a comedy argument. You're stating your view of the world, and even when he says something controversial, he's gotten a bit of a debate with an audience member and made it funny. The only time where it's and I mentioned this before, I've seen acts do it on the circuit, but sometimes they're not gonna. They go back from it. They hesitate with it, and if you're gonna push it, you need to stay with it. And also, yeah, you need to. You can say what you want, but you better have the chop to do it. And you got to see where it goes.
Right.
But one thing that do you think it's right that people get destroyed for taking a risk on stage? Because most of the time when we get on stage, a lot of the times we're just trying to make people laugh. If you can see maybe the intent is quite visceral, maybe there is something there. But for the most part, I think most of us as comics, we're just trying to make you laugh.
Right.
If we get it wrong, we apologize.
Yeah. Right. Well, exactly. And this is the thing. It certainly comes with experience, being able to say controversial things on stage. And I've seen it employed very well by really some experienced comedians, though. And it's the kind of thing like, did this guy just say that? And then the way they handle it is great. Maybe making it a debate or really making people understand this is my thinking on that. This is why I can say these things. Or even calling out the audience and saying, hey, don't shut me down for saying things like that, because 3 years ago you were saying exactly the same thing. But I think the cancel culture, the whole idea of putting people down is such quite a toxic thing, really. And yeah, to try and navigate that, I think if you're going to be prepared to say stuff like that, number one, be prepared for the lashback. And secondly, know how you are actually going to deal with it if it becomes too much. And you know what, Marvin? You're just not listening anymore is probably quite a good strategy for that. Don't read the comments. Don't go back onto social media. Just stay off it, because it eventually does die down and people get over it.
No.
Sometimes, though, with some of the things that people say, although it may be controversial, sometimes it's just not funny. So it's like, I understand what you're trying to do, but like at the end of the day, it's just not funny. So
especially when women are the target, and which often does happen, and people will make really bad jokes about gender-based violence or women in general. But then again, I suppose it's quite subjective comedy. So as a woman, I don't have to laugh at that. I don't generally.
Okay. This may get me into trouble with you guys, but I'm going to ask you this, and I want to see your opinion on it. Because there was a comedian I watched at night on a Thursday. And have you guys traveled to London at all?
I have, yeah. Long time, many, many years ago.
Have you taken a London tube, Chantal?
I have, yeah.
There was a comedian telling a joke. I didn't get the full gist of it. It was a long night. But he said something about staring at women on the tube. And it just, straight away when you say something like that, it's like, bloody hell, where's this going? This sounds a bit creepy. And then the woman in the audience completely hated him. And this lady and him got in a bit of back and forth. But he did, he didn't go into it, right, and break the tension. He just sort of hesitated a bit. And it seemed like he was rambling. There wasn't any point, or how would he have made that funny? If he'd made himself the victim of it, maybe he could have made it funny. But everyone hated them. It was awkward as hell. And it completely tanked the night. How could he have adjusted something like that to make it funny? Because it's
I'm not sure that I'm not sure there's any comeback for that, but I don't know, Nolwazi.
No, sometimes that happens where like either the comedian loses the audience, or it's just been like, it's just such a crazy thing that he's thrown out there that everyone's just like, what are you on about, you know?
Yeah.
So it really depends on the audience and the comedian, how they handle that situation. Because as soon as they hesitate, then the audience is like, okay, you know what?
It's
We've
dead
let it be
meat.
known.
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah, we've let it be known that we don't like it, and we're either gonna keep going at this guy, or we're just gonna leave it and not respond and just carry on, or maybe like boo him or something. But yeah, it's not a great idea sometimes, some of these jokes that these guys
Yeah.
have. But
But
yeah.
yeah, but I think still I think that your point, Marvin, on the hesitation and not being prepared for the backlash and the follow through.
Yes, 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 yes.
You have to be prepared for that. If you
Yeah.
know that something you're going to say, I've noticed, because I do a bit of a set, and I've been thinking about this. I haven't spoken to you about this, Nolwazi, but it's interesting
Yeah.
for me because I'm not going to stop talking about it. I talk about my ex-husband in a not very nice light, and I can feel the sort of tension with regards to that. And I'm thinking to myself, is it because men won't find that funny? And men are probably most of the audience. And maybe women would be uncomfortable with it. Or maybe it's just not funny. There's that as well. So it's just, I think sometimes we are going to say stuff that impacts certain people, but we must be prepared to either to carry through with it, or address it. Or I've got a story that I tell about in our city. I personally drink water that I buy from a shop. I don't drink tap water because it's not great. So I've got a whole joke that I tell about I ran out of money, I couldn't buy water, I had to drink water from the tap. And a woman from the audience, one of the audience ones, and she totally threw me. She said to me, "That's normal for us." Really insinuating that I'm white, I'm privileged. I acknowledge that I'm white and privileged, but that I'm in a better position than her, and was totally unprepared for that. But, and she had a very valid, but I could, if I think about that, there's a comeback for that somewhere along the line. Whether the comeback is, yeah, I'm white, that's what I do, whatever.
Yeah.
In a basic form. But it's interesting for me, the whole being anti-man, but I'm not being anti-men really, I'm just being anti my ex. But I feel like a bit of a pushback on that. So it's interesting for me. I need to.
And a lot of the times where I've seen someone do material that could go dodgy areas, like Louis C.K. and you got Frankie Boyle and Jimmy Carr. The thing is, when they go there, they either have a very sharp joke that makes people laugh, they don't hesitate with it, or they talk, as you said, it's not necessarily your opinion on all things. It's like your experience of dealing with certain things on that particular individual and your story you faced. That's where I've seen it work. But a lot of times I see they just say a random offensive comment out of nowhere. Oh, woman, why did you do this? Why didn't you just say a funny story about a strange thing that you've come to realize through dating women and the weird woman you've met that's made you come up with that little thing, rather than just say, "Oh, woman, this." Just like you're painting people all under the same brush. Not everyone's the same.
Right. Yeah.
And isn't that offensive in itself as well? You're saying that all people are one thing, and it's like, you don't know me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where it comes in, this ability to be able to speak your truth and say your thing, but also make everybody understand this is my story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is my experience.
Yeah.
And that's where I've seen it very well. Somebody who said something very controversial, and he really went in and he said, yeah, and the audience was like, whoa, like, no. And he carried on with it, and he said, yeah, here's my thing. And he made a funny story of it. And he addressed this controversial, I can't even remember what it was that he said, but he really, so that by the end of the evening, there were still people pissed off with him. There were people that were very sort of anti him, but it was a handful of people. And the rest of the people were back to eating out of his hand, just the way he'd actually played it, and the way he'd said, this is my experience. This is why I think this. And yeah, but that's experience. That's the stage time, eh?
Yeah. And some of the instances where I see it, it's they're trying to be like a comic they admire rather than being themselves. They're trying
Right.
to be
Yeah.
someone else rather than them.
Mm. Mm.
That happens a lot, but the thing that's interesting is if you are performing as a new comedian and there's experienced guys in the room, they're very quick to pick up on that, and they will say to you, like, dude, have your own voice, have your own point of view, have your own experiences as your base of like where you would refer to. Don't base your joke off of someone else's joke or use a joke that's not necessarily original, because then when you do that, it's very easy for someone to pick apart the whole thing because it's not even based on you. It's based on something you saw or heard. So, but and even in the way that they do it, they might not even say to you like, "Oh, that wasn't okay." They might just roast you and say, "Oh, see, you got that joke from Google," you know. So there's all sorts of different ways where they kind of call you in instead of calling you out. But it does happen.
Now, following what we've said here, I'm from a different place from you guys. We've got different sort of norms and all that. But for when you speak to people from outside of South Africa and he talks to you about South Africa, what are the common things that you get annoyed about and you're like, no, this isn't how it is?
So I'm interested in this question, Marvin. What ideas do you have about South Africa? What do
Oh,
you
God.
think? Yeah.
Well, I don't know anything about South Africa. I've only seen like the film with Matt Damon playing the rugby player. Um, all I know is that Soweto is a dodgy place. And I know that from my experience of dealing with South Africans in the UK, I find that you guys are quite hard and quite sort of no nonsense with certain things, more so than Brits will be a bit more polite about things. But I get the feeling that South Africans don't tolerate nonsense. That's the feeling I get. From my experience of meeting South
Yeah.
Africans in the UK, that's the impression I get. That's
Yeah.
my truth. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
true, but that's my truth.
So my next question to that, would they have been white South Africans or black South Africans?
All white.
Okay. So I think there's so much, we've got so much going for our country. I know Nolwazi's got some answers on this question as well, but I teach English to mainly Turkish students, to be honest. And I have found none of them to have any weird and wild ideas about what South Africa is like. So I do think that there is a perception that we have a fairly dangerous country, but I tell people, and my mom and dad run a guest house when they come here, you've got to take the normal precautions that you do anywhere in the world. Don't have all your photographic equipment hanging around you. Don't just trust anybody. You've got to know that people are opportunistic. They're going to try and take a chance. Don't, as a woman or as a man, be in dark, dodgy areas at night. Just on the Soweto thing, and I haven't been to Soweto for a very long time, but Soweto is like any sort of city or community. It has dodgy areas, and then some of the areas are great. They've got a thriving comedy culture in Soweto, and I know many black comedians that do comedy in Soweto all the time, and I know a white woman that regularly goes into Soweto to do comedy. So it's just the normal sort of rules. Be vigilant. Don't just trust anybody. If somebody tells you that you have to pay to walk on the pier, understand that that pier is a free pier. You don't have to pay to walk on it. And, it's just those kind of things. So, yeah, I think that you're just talking about us being hard. I think white people in South Africa are very entitled and feel a bit opinionated. Should I be saying this on a podcast?
Say it. It's your
We
truth.
literally are 8% of the population in South Africa. 8%. But we get ahead of ourselves and we think that we have the first and final say in anything that happens in this country. But that aside, one of the things that I find is that we have got such a great response to drama and trauma in South Africa. When anything goes wrong, the humor flies. People come out, they are incredibly creative. And the memes are flying, and we're making fun of this terrible, traumatic situation. So I think that's one of the great things about this country, besides the fact that it's actually really so beautiful.
Oh.
So for me, the misconceptions that annoy me are that we are not a developed country, because obviously South Africa is considered a third world country. We're in the developing world. We're not a developed country. But the thing is, in South Africa, we have relatively good infrastructure. We have amazing malls. We have beaches. We have natural attractions like game parks and nature reserves and mountains. And we basically have everything, you know? And the food here is also really good. It's better than a lot of places in the world, we've come to find out recently. And the one that really, I don't know if I can say this, but the one that really grates my tits is the one where a lot of Americans had the misconception for a very long time that in South Africa we have lions as pets and we ride elephants to school as children. We have roads, we have cars, we have air conditioning, we have underfloor heating in some of the richer houses. You know, like we have all these comforts of the first world. It's not a backwards country. We are actually quite developed in that sense. But obviously we have the issues of, you know, poverty and corruption within the government and crime, you know, things like that. But everywhere has those problems. It's not just us. We're not special in that sense. And South Africa is a beautiful country. You should come, Marvin.
Yes. So what's how is the comedy differ in different parts of South Africa as well? Because I'm sure, like the UK, I speak to a lot of comedians that say, you know, everything's all the same, but I don't necessarily. I think a lot of comedians say it depends on the room you're playing more so than different regions being different. What would you say your experience of doing comedy is like in terms of the rooms and like how you adjust to different audiences?
Do you want to go? Shall I go?
I'll go. So I'll jump in quickly. I've performed in a lot of places in the country. So Cape Town, Joburg, Stellenbosch, which is like a smaller city in the Western Cape. And the thing I've noticed is it does very much depend on the room and the demographics of the room in terms of maybe how your humor will be taken or the response of the crowd. But in South Africa, also our audiences are relatively conservative. So a lot of swearing, a lot of graphic or explicit talk. Depending on the room that you are in, it might get a great response, but also you run the risk of alienating your audience and having them get to a point where they're like, okay, no, this is actually too much, and we are not going to respond anymore. We're just going to sit there and look at you. So it really does depend on where you are in the country, which room you're in, what are the demographics, because in Cape Town, a lot of the audience is white people. So what a lot of the comics will do for a little, maybe the first minute or so, is roast the white people in the audience, which they weirdly seem to enjoy. So there's that situation. And I heard from another comedian that said, if you go to Durban and you perform for Indian people, they don't care really about what you have to say about you. They want to hear about them and jokes about them, making fun of them. They want you to make jokes about them and roast them, because to them, that's funny, because that's what they relate to. So, and that was from like one of our top comedians in South Africa saying that. So I thought, wow, okay, that's actually quite interesting. But in the Eastern Cape, I don't know about that. If Xhosa people are that eager to be roasted, especially by their own. But yeah, it's an interesting experience all over the country.
Okay. And through your experience as comedy as a whole, how has comedy shaped you as a person now? And who were comics that you guys admire on the South African scene, and why do you admire them?
You go,
Yeah,
Chantal.
yeah. So I think comedy, I'm loving it. And let me tell you something, Marvin. I am almost 60. I've just turned 57, and this is about the 18th job I've had in my life. I'm a proper career switcher, and but I'm loving comedy. Comedy has just, it's just, it really makes me, I think it's helping me think differently. It's also helping me become a little less people pleasy and actually say things. Still got a long way to go, but I feel like that's part of the whole journey. Um, I always love the woman, simply because there are so few of us here. Um, I would say maybe 10% of the comedians in South Africa are women. Hey, Nolwazi, 10, maybe 15%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
20
But the woman,
pushing it. Yeah.
pushing it at 20, yeah. But I love the
Yeah.
women. I generally love them. And the comedians that I love are more performative. I love watching performative comedy. So Rob van Vuuren is one of our top. He's not just a comedian, he's an actor. He doesn't just do stand-up. He plays a character, actually. It's called Namaste Bay. He's up there in England at the moment. They were at Riverside Studios recently.
Okay.
Now, this week. And they're going off to Edinburgh, him and Sophie Jones, our young clown friend. Fabulous comedy for me to watch it. I love to see people being performative and doing absolutely bizarre, strange, ridiculous things on stage. That really makes me laugh. Yeah, but so Rob van Vuuren is a guy. I really like Tatson Konzo, although he started saying some questionable things, so I might have to readjust that. Robbie Williams, not Robbie Williams, man, Robbie Collins. He's just won Comedian of the Year at our Savannah Comics Choice Awards, which was really also great. But and also what I love about the woman is there are some white female comedians, but the black female comedians just have another level of funny going for them. I've recently saw Stella Dlalangala on stage, and she just blew me away. I loved her energy, her content that she was talking about was just so relatable, and she was just so bloody funny. So yeah, so that's just some of them. But yeah, I'm changing.
For me, it's been an interesting experience in terms of I kind of have stepped more into myself. So I'm okay, I'm gonna sound very woo-woo for a second, but I'm a Libra. So we are people pleasing, we avoid conflict, we do not like to kind of go against the flow of things. And when someone says to me, no, we're going to do it this way, I'm more than likely to say, you know what, I'll compromise and we'll do it that way. But now, because I've been doing comedy now for the last 5 years, it's also put me in a space where I've had to advocate for myself and I've had to speak up for myself. So if someone is doing something that I don't like or that I don't agree with, I can say, hey, actually, I don't want to do this. This is what I want to do. And I would like it very much if we would do this. So it's helped me in that sense to kind of be able to say when I don't like something, when I don't want to do something. And the ladies that I like in comedy, one of the biggest names in comedy is Celeste Ntuli. She's a South African comedian. She's based in Joburg, but I think she's from Durban. She's a Zulu lady. Another person that I really enjoyed, we were both there for Stella Dlangalala's performance 2 weeks ago, I think. She was hilarious. Like her jokes were just, as Chantal said, so relatable, and it was things that we talk about as women. So it was just a really nice thing to see. But she's also an actress. So that's how I knew her. So I was a fan of her acting, and then I got to see her do comedy, and I was like, oh wow, this is actually a completely different side to her. And I thought, what a cool person. But other people that I really like in the industry, Nina Hasty, Cassidy Nicholson, who else? Angel Campy, Lindy Johnson, Waylene Bierkus, but I think she goes by the stage name of Waybeline now. But yeah, a lot of the female comedians are quite good. Lindy Johnson, some of the younger people, Kate Pinchuk and Sarah Abram. Who else? Sophie is in there. She is quite a good comic, although she's looking more on the theatrical side of things nowadays. But she has like an award-winning and critically acclaimed play called Eel, which I recently saw. Chantal wasn't able to see it because she was already in Joburg, but it was an amazing show. And just to see someone who is so multifaceted, because not only does she do comedy, but she acts in theater, she does clowning. She's just an amazing all-rounder. And to have that person like turn around and tell a couple of jokes, and you're like, wow, okay, I'm slacking a bit, clearly. So yeah, but it's great to know her as a friend as well.
Okay. Oh, amazing. I'm definitely going to chat to her. So for anyone that's listening right now and they want to find out about you, what is your address so they can find out about you?
So for me, yeah, Chantal, you can go.
Yeah, so I'm Chantal Harris Comedy on Facebook and Instagram, and we have the Friendly City Comedy Crew, both on Instagram and Facebook. So that's how people can find us.
Okay.
For me, I am Nolwazi Nkwandla on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I think it's like Nolwazi Nkwandla 2974. But you can just put my name in the search bar and it should pop up with some of the clips that I have loaded onto YouTube. In terms of a comedy page, I do not have one, but I should probably get that started. But yeah, otherwise I post everything on my personal Instagram. On TikTok, it's funny videos that I've made, but there's not that many. I think there's about 7. It's a recent thing that I've been doing, the thing of funny TikToks. So yeah.
Okay. Well, guys, you know where to go if you want to find out about Chantal and Nolwazi. And of course, if you want to go and watch their fantastic, the Friendly City Comedy Crew, the most dangerous comedy gang in South Africa, you know where to go. See you later, guys.
Thank you so much.